Good evening and welcome to the August 15th regular meeting of Council. The City of Parksville recognizes the people of the Coast Salish Nations and their traditional territory upon which we gather with gratitude. The first item we have on the agenda tonight is the minutes of the Council meeting of August 3rd, 2016. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Salter. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Thank you, that is carried. The next item on the agenda is the approval of tonight's agenda, that the August 15, 2016 Council meeting agenda be approved. Mover and a seconder, Councillor Salter, Councillor Powell. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Thank you, that is carried. We have 3 delegations this evening. And our first delegation is Staff Sergeant Roger Plamondon. And I challenge you to say that name. That's the proper pronunciation of the name for those of you who are not sure. Welcome to the Council meeting. This is your first meeting? Great. And make yourself at home.
Oh, thank you.
And you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. That's the first time in 35 years that someone has actually pronounced my name correctly. And it's a pleasure to be here to both the council members and to the staff. I guess, first of all, I should just introduce myself. I'm Roger Plamondon. I'm a member. I have been for 35 years. And as I mentioned there a little bit earlier, I probably should have worked a little harder to get to a place like Parksville in the past. It's a beautiful community, and it's a great place to work. We have had a significant transition here at the detachment in the past year. 4 of our members have actually been promoted and moved on to some senior positions there within the organization. And thus, this is the reason I've been here for the last couple of months here, just filling in until such time as the NCOIC and the Ops Commander get here. So there's been no significant paradigm shift in the way the policing has been done, because it was well run by Brian Hunter. It's been status quo, and we're anxiously awaiting the arrival of Mark Pelche, and it looks like he's going to be commencing probably on the 5th of September. Stephen Rose, who's the Ops NCO, he is actually here. He's just on his holidays for another week, but he will be commencing in his new position on the 22nd of September. So there'll be an overlap between Stephen and myself there for a couple of days, and then he'll be basically your NCOIC there for a period of about 2 weeks. In terms of the statistics for the detachment there, we've been very, very fortunate. The only 2 areas that are of concern are the areas of break and enter into residences. And part of that is attributed to break and enters into new developments, houses that are under construction with either appliances being stolen and tools, items of significant value. We have identified 1 suspect there with regards to that, and we continue to work on getting sufficient evidence there to possibly lay some charges in the future. The other area where there's been a significant increase in terms of criminal code offenses is the mischief to businesses. Part of that is attributable to a new scoring that's been used by the detachment. Approximately 30 of those files are what's called loss of enjoyment. So if somebody is calling the detachment for service and they're saying that, for example, and I'll just use a local bank, someone's sleeping in the bank, and we get called for service, that would be scored as a mischief. If we have someone on the street canvassing for money, that would also be scored as mischief there, and that's part of the reason the mischief stats have been driven up. But having said that, even if we eliminate the 30, it's still a fairly high number here in the community. The budget for the detachment, I just got the statistical information there today. We're actually supposed to be at about a 33% benchmark for this time of the year, and we're sitting at 15%. So we're doing very well there in that regard. The summer, especially the last 2 months that I've been here, there's been no significant files that I would deem worthy of a briefing note to the Island District, so we've been blessed in that regard, other than one little incident, but it wasn't in the Parksville area here this weekend, that resulted in the deaths of a couple of individuals here, and we're thinking it's probably attributed to the use of fentanyl, and that's a problem right across British Columbia there at the moment. So I will leave it at that, and then just turn it over to you, Your Worship, if there are any questions.
Thank you. And by the way, I'd like to point out that there's another Mark coming in. Spells his name M-A-R-C. Just for your information. Any questions from members of council for Sergeant Plamondon? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Staff Sergeant, for your presentation. Concise and gives information that's easy to understand. From my point of view as being a business owner, I know that I've had 4 calls in with little theft and I would assume mischief and vandalism type things. Can you tell me is there an age kind of bracket that you see most of our mischief taking place? Is it younger adults, or is it people in our community, or are they from outside our community?
Well, with regards to the 30 files, I would say most of them are transients coming through the community, and they, of course, vary in age. Unfortunately, with regards to many of the mischief offenses, often we are coming after the fact, and what's happened is the individuals have already dispersed, and they're already gone before our arrival there. So I really couldn't give you specifics there with regards to demographics or age group with regards to it. But I can say that looking at the statistical information and looking at the location, most of these offenses are occurring in the downtown core area where people tend to frequent, like so the McDonald's, the beach area and so on. So I can only assume, with regards to the demographic aspect of it.
Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. So I'm just wondering, what happens? What do you do with folks who are sleeping in the bank, in the doorway in the bank after hours, and then you come? Do you take them to the precinct, or?
No, and in those particular cases, they're not necessarily committing an offense. It is being scored as a mischief. So in most cases, what would generally happen is we'd have a conversation with that particular individual. We try to get some information, details on that particular individual. We will query those individuals. There's no requirements on those particular individuals to provide us with their names or date of birth, but those are the 2 sorts of information that we do try to obtain. If there's no records, there's no warrants for those particular individuals, we ask them to move on. If they're in need of some social services, we may put them in touch with victim services, but in most cases they will get up from that location and move on to another spot there. So we're really only displacing the problem at that particular time.
Just a quick follow-up. Do you have any services that you can send them to? So, for instance, they're sleeping in the doorway. Is there anywhere that you know of where they could go, where they could stay? Like, do you have any of that information, or?
I do not personally, and that's why I would get that referral to victim services. I would get them involved there. In that regard.
Councillor Beale, and then Councillor Oates.
Okay. Thank you, Worship, and thank you for your presentation. As a follow-up, actually, from Councillor Salters, I understand that the RCMP does work, does communicate with the homelessness outreach task force, with the host team as well. So that's that's great to have that interagency communication and working together. I was curious as well about the stats for the theft over and under 5,000. That seems to also be a jump, but I was also curious to know if that theft is that separate from theft from motor vehicle, or does that include that category as well?
No, it's completely separate there. So if we're looking at the theft from motor vehicle, has gone down a little bit, but again, there it's 94, and that's driven by certain things such as doors being unlocked by the registered owners, and often that's a crime of opportunity, especially if someone is looking to turn something over for another product here in the community. In terms of the theft over would encompass everything else other than theft from motor vehicles. Okay.
Councillor Oates.
Thank you very much, and thank you for what you do. I'm referring to the chart there that has the mayor's report, and it talks about the incidents per period. Does that mean, simply put, that like for the B&E for businesses over the year, we could expect to be 44, multiply that by 4 for 4 quarters? So that would be a significant increase in theft over the week. If the trend continues for the theft over 5,000, it would be 400 incidents of that. Okay, so we need to start paying attention to that sort of stuff. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's a disturbing that it's increasing to that, because if you take the 1 quarter and 100, that's a large number, but you multiply it by 400 in a community that's considered to be pretty law-abiding. That's concerning.
Valid point. Thank you.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you very much for your report. I'm just curious, you talked about the fentanyl overdose, and I know that in Vancouver, I'm not sure what the drug is called, but it helps save lives if people find anybody with a fentanyl overdose. Do you have access to that, or is it going to be part of your call-outs, or is the EMTs?
It's being examined. We're obviously not medical practitioners, and it's something that's being looked at very closely, not only for the individuals that we're dealing with, but also with our members. As you're well aware, there the fentanyl, the other one that's significant and even a more potent and dangerous drug is W18, which is sometimes 100 times higher than fentanyl. So it really doesn't take very much there for this to cause significant harm or death to individuals in our community. So they are exploring the ideas of maybe having spray for our officers, but to what context it would be used in, I do not know at this particular time.
And so just, I don't know if you can answer this or not, but how fast would that be available if it is available?
Again, I don't know the answer for that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I only have one comment. Your predecessor talked about theft from motor vehicles, and people don't lock their cars. Mm-hmm. So I'm in the habit now, wherever I go, especially in front of a business or into a shopping center, the first thing I do when I stop my car is I look to the car on both sides of me, and invariably one of them isn't locked. And the other day I thought I saw what I'll never see again, that not only was the car unlocked, the windows were open, and there was a checkbook sitting on the passenger seat, and the checkbook was open. You could see the check. So it's the people had better start locking their cars, because it happens all too infrequently. In my case, I can't help myself now because your predecessor drummed it into us that people should be locking their cars. Well, one of these days, if I see something really valuable, I think I'll put it in my car and sit there and wait for the person to come back and say, "Here, if you don't lock your door, if I'm a thief, I'm gone with your possession." Yeah, but what I'm afraid, why I don't do that is I'm afraid the RCMP might come around and arrest me for taking something that doesn't belong.
I was just going to mention there we have a bait vehicle, so be careful.
Okay.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
great.
I'd love to see that.
All right. Well, enough. That cures it for me. Okay. Well, thank you once again. Be safe. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much.
See you again. Bye. Oh, well. The next delegation we have is from Vancouver Island University. Ms. Rolanda Murray, and Rolanda is going to tell us about the work being done at VIU to promote the Canada Learning Bond issue, which is a tremendously important issue, and I think you'll find this presentation extremely, extremely valuable.
Thank you, Your Worship. On behalf of VIU, I'd like to acknowledge I'm on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, and I'm grateful to be here with Mayor and Council to talk about this important project. My job at VIU is called Canada Learning Bond Coordinator, and what that means is that it is my job to reach out into our communities and talk to people about the Canada Learning Bond, which is a federal government grant that is designed for low-income families to help them save for their children's education after high school. So to help low-income families send their kids to post-secondary education. To be eligible, it's a $2,000 grant that goes into the Registered Education Savings Plans, or RESPs, that are held at banks or credit unions in our communities. To be eligible, children need to be born in 2004 or later. They have to be living in families whose combined household income is $45,000 a year or less, and they have to have an RESP set up for them. Elements of the Canada Learning Bond, how it works is the first payment is $500. Every year thereafter that the family remains eligible, they get an additional $100 deposited into the RESP to a maximum of $2,000. It is retroactive. So if I'm a single mom making less than $45,000 and my child is born in 2007, but I didn't know about it until now, and I go in and set up an RESP, I get all that back money that I was eligible for. So as long as we get people during their eligibility period, they don't miss out on any of the payments. Get it and forget it. Once a family signs up for the Canada Learning or is into the Canada Learning Bond program, they never have to do another thing except wait until their child's ready to go to post-secondary and withdraw the money. They don't have to re-register, which is really important because often we're dealing with families that have a low level of financial literacy, and so the least intervention, less intervention is better. And my favorite piece, no parental contribution whatsoever is required. So they can set up an RESP at any bank or credit union in this community for free, and they are not required to put any money of their own into that account in order to get the Canada Learning Bond. Studies show there's a big correlation once families have set this set up as a priority. Even low-income families often do find money to set aside for it, but it's important that families know it doesn't require them to put any of their own money in. This is a stat that I say probably almost every day in my work. A child living in a low-income family with as little as $500 set aside in an RESP for their education is more than 4 times more likely to attend a post-secondary institution than a child with no savings. So having that money set aside for kids makes a massive impact on the dynamics and in the family and how families talk to their children about possibilities. More often than not, I find amongst low-income families that they're not speaking to their children about the option of post-secondary because they're not clear on how they're going to make that happen. There's also correlations, not quite as strong. It's about 3 times more likely to correlations to how successful they are once they get to post-secondary. So they're more successful in their first year if they have some financial support in the form of RESP money. In BC, we are one of the fortunate provinces. We have a brand new grant of our very own called the BC Training and Education Savings Grant. It was introduced in August in 2016. Oh, sorry, that should be 2015. It's the 1-year anniversary. It is not for low-income families. It is for all families who have a child between the ages of 6 and 9 years old and have an RESP already set up for that child. It is a one-time payment of $1,200. So while this is not specifically for low-income families, if a family was low income and had a child in that age bracket, this would be an additional funding that they could access again with no parental contribution required. So what's the issue that I deal with, and why do not more people not know about the Canada Learning Bond, and why are more families not accessing it? Child poverty is the issue. Poverty of expectations is a term coined by John Horn at the City of Nanaimo. He's the social planner there. And poverty of expectations basically is what I spoke to earlier, which is I don't know how I'm going to help you get to university, so I'm not going to talk about it, and I'm not going to have any expectation that you attend. My expectation is that when you're finished high school, if you finish high school, that you are going to go out and get a job, which typically means a hourly rate, usually at minimum wage, with very little prospect for the future. So we're dealing with poverty of expectations. We're also often dealing with cultural barriers. Certainly amongst the First Nations community, there are cultural barriers to a post-secondary, cultural barriers to most educational institutions coming out of the residential school experience. But they're not the only cultural community that have barriers. Certainly new immigrants coming to our cities can often have misconceptions or very little context around post-secondary. So sometimes we're battling those cultural barriers. And definitely financial literacy barriers. If I'm a single mom and I don't really understand how things work, I don't know what a mutual fund is or a GIC, I may not want to do this for my child because I fear what that experience will be if I go into the bank. Or if I'm a family that sometimes bounces checks at my bank, I may fear going into the bank to ask for this set up because that they may look down on me or want to know where that money is. So there's lots of financial barriers. And then we looked at the poverty numbers. Canada, 14% of children live in poverty. British Columbia, that's 20.4%. In the Nanaimo region, so that's sort of the regional district of Nanaimo, it's as high as 22.90. And again, my PowerPoint keeps getting rid of that number, but that value for the Aboriginal rate is child poverty in Canada amongst Aboriginal children is 38%. So it's a bit of an uphill battle. So let me tell you about Parksville. So in Parksville, there are 991 children that are eligible for the Canada Learning Bond. That means you have 991 children living in poverty in Parksville. Of that 991 children, 335 of them are already receiving the Canada Learning Bond, which is fantastic. And so they're already getting payments. Unfortunately, 656 of them are not. So you have a very solid uptake rate, 34%. Unfortunately, that's solid because that's what it's typically across Canada is about 34%. So can you imagine how many children don't have it? But because there are 656 children in your community that are eligible for up to $2,000 of funding and are not getting it, you are missing out, your community is missing out on $1.3 million in unpaid federal grants, specifically for children living in low-income families in your area. So that's the opportunity. Just to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing at VIU. Before we began this work in our community, the uptake rate in the regional district of Nanaimo was 24%. The most recent stats we have are for 2015. We've got it up to 32% with some concerted effort, which means that, again, in terms of investment from the federal government, that's an additional $2.3 million of funding that we've been able to inject into the community by promoting this. Keep in mind when you look at that difference from 24 to 32%, it doesn't seem like a staggering increase, but during that same time where we increased the uptake, there were 2,000 new children living in poverty in the regional district of Nanaimo. So the denominator in that equation keeps moving, unfortunately. So what are we doing in our community? We are partnering. We have some national partners that help us do our work, but we're also partnering with organizations that are already in a trusted relationship with families. These are some of the ones that I've worked with locally in Nanaimo, and some that, like Island Health, that go across the island. So we partner because what we need to do is capitalize on trusting relationships where people already are. Basically, the stats have shown that people don't want to, say, go to VIU to hear about the Canada Learning Bond. They'd much rather go to organizations and to people that they recognize in their community. And so we go to those organizations and we work through them to bring the message of the Canada Learning Bond. These are a few things that we do to raise awareness or to do what we do. We speak at events, at things like Mayor and Council. We host events in schools. We bring resources to bear where it's necessary, such as bringing Service Canada to Kwamut-Lalem in Nanaimo so that we could ensure that all the children there had SIN numbers, so we could then get them signed up for RASPs, and we did that. We got about 80 of their children set up with the Canada Learning Bond. And we reduce barriers, so we coach people about what it's going to look like when they go into the bank, and we raise awareness in a variety of different ways. So in terms of the benefits to the City of Parksville, other than everybody feels good about the idea that more children have access to education and that children in poverty are getting access to the funding that's specifically set aside for them, there are some very tangible benefits to this sort of work. Stats are clear. The more you learn, the more you earn. So children or students that get post-secondary educations become adults that make more money. And when they make more money, not only do they pay more taxes, but they're more likely to stay in their home community, and they're more resilient to things like job loss. So that is good for the community. It makes a really robust economic base to the community. Lower unemployment, but again, not only are they less likely to lose their jobs, they're more likely to be able to get new jobs if they do lose their jobs with a post-secondary education. Healthier population. Social determinants of health tell us that people who have higher levels of education are healthier, which means there's less drawing on the resources in our health, like island health resources. Decreased crime rate. Our Staff Sergeant's gone, but decreased crime rate. People with post-secondary educations, the more people you have with post-secondary educations in your community, you see decreased crime rate, which is fantastic and, is a good thing. And more engaged citizens. A stat that I particularly like is people with higher levels of education more likely to get engaged in their community, and they have higher rates of volunteerism. And so those are just a few of the sort of top 5 things that having a post-secondary education brings to a community in a real tangible way. And so that's sort of my presentation, and I'd be thrilled to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks very much. Councillor Powell, and then Councillor Salter, and then Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm just curious about the stats. Where did you get them from?
So we work with the federal government, and they give us stats based on what's called the FSA, the forward sortation area, which is the first 3 digits of a postal code. So for Parksville, we know for the Parksville postal codes, we get that information that way.
Okay, so are people who are on income assistance also counted?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome.
I just have one question. So for the Canada Learning grant, the federal grant, is there a cutoff age then? So, because you said, well, if you don't figure this out until 2007, well, then you could retroactively. So what if your child, I don't know, is 13? Like, is there an age of cutoff there for people to apply?
Yes, there is. Thank you. You have to you have to get engaged in the program by the time your child's 15 to be able to get the money, because that's at which point they age out. So you have to get it before they age out of the program.
So by age 15 or age 14?
By age 15.
15. Oh, okay, good.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Beale, and then Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you very much for the presentation. Now, if we are speaking with individuals who might be able to take advantage of this, we can just Google Canada Learning Bond and get further. Where should they go for some specifics if they want to find out about how to get involved? And also, I was curious about the BCTESG. I just didn't quite write down enough notes about that.
Sure. So the BC Training and Education Savings Grant is our provincial grant, and we're one of only 3 provinces that has one that gives free money. And it is a one-time payment of $1,200 into the RESP of an eligible child. To be eligible, they have to be between the ages of 6 and 9. Parent and child both must be BC residents, and they have to have an existing RESP set up, or they can set up an RESP for the purposes of obtaining the grant, but there has to be an RESP. That's where the money has to go. And in terms of where to get more information, certainly if they're at home, a lot of families that are living in low-income situations sort of like to get a little information privately before they reach out. And so what I would recommend ideally is Google it. I certainly, VIU has I've created a website there that I think is very accessible and has some general information. And so that's www.viu.ca/CLB. But truthfully, they can go into any bank or credit union where they have a trusting relationship and ask at the front desk and say, I understand there might be a grant that my family is eligible for, and any bank or credit union will be able to help them. I'm certainly available as a resource for anybody in the community that has questions or isn't finding their financial institution helpful. But yeah, any bank or credit union that I've experienced in our community has been more than willing to help.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you. Thank you, Rolanda, for coming and speaking with us today. So my question is compounding interest.
Okay.
To a degree.
Okay.
And so they're available up to $2,000 and everything. So is there interest per year as if you start early? Like I started with my children at birth and everything, that they had RESPs set up. So is there interest earned on the bonds or on the as well?
Yes, there is. So what would happen is I went in and I opened up an RESP and I made application for the Canada Learning Bond. The bank would do that on my behalf and the money would start going in. In addition to that, for all families that have money in RESPs for their children, there's the Canada Education Savings Grant. This is more commonly known as matching funds. And so when a family puts money into an account, there are matching funds. So there are some funds available that match where it grows, but also RESP money is invested by a bank or a credit union, and the money grows that way as well. So in terms of investment income, that would not be retroactive. So if I didn't know about the program for 3 or 4 years and I got this retroactive payment, I obviously would miss out on the investment income from 3 or 4 years ago, but the amount of money being invested in present time would be a larger amount. So it's a bit complicated, and I'm not a banker anymore, so I'm going to bow out at this point. But there certainly is, it's a minimum of $2,000 because through matching and investment income, the money does grow, and the earlier you begin, the more opportunity you have for that growth.
Councillor Oates.
Thank you very much. I noticed in your list of partners there was the city of Nanaimo was there, School District 68 was there. Are you going to be approaching the school district here, School District 69, and doing a similar presentation?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what can we do to assist?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking. Primarily, you are one of those organizations where people have a trusting relationship in the community. My sense is that you probably know families right now that you think are eligible. You probably speak with constituents that are eligible and could use the money. But you're also probably working with organizations in the community or in touch with organizations in the community that are working with families that are eligible. So my hope in coming here was to tell you a little bit about it, tell you that VIU was in a position to be able to assist and be out in the community. We're not looking for anybody to fund what we're doing. We just want basically connections, introductions, and for people in positions of power in their community and positions that are respected by people to know about the information and to share it and to be talking about it, because the biggest problem is making sure people hear the information.
Just for your information, Councillor Oates and the remainder of Council, I invited Rolanda to come to the EGDEV committee meeting late last month, and SOS was there, Family Resources. The Chamber was there. The First Nations from the News First Nations was there. So there was a good collection of folk. The Oceanside Development and Construction Association. So I think you got a lot of cards from people that you can contact.
And if I may, Your Worship, we are getting in contact with the News First Nations. They've contacted us to do some outreach, which I think is really important.
Great.
And as a matter of fact, I'll be working with the SOS tomorrow afternoon, doing the presentations for some of the families that they work with.
And I believe you're also working with the Qualicum First Nations.
Yes, absolutely.
So what I'd like to point out, and thank you very much again, this is my third time, and I never get tired of it because it's a great program that I knew nothing about. But anybody who's watching tonight, whether they're watching on live streaming or whether they're in the audience, if you want to get a hold of Rolanda, either directly or through my office, I have all the information, so you can contact us, and we can put you in touch, and Rolanda can go and visit you. Okay? Thanks very much. Thank you for what you do. It's great. Okay, the next presentation we have is from the Kingsley Low Rental Housing Society, Mr. Duane Round and Mrs. Felicia Kreutzer? Kreutzer? Did I pronounce that right? Good. And we all know that you're doing very important work in the community, so Mr. Round, over to you. Have you got a PowerPoint? Oh, great. Okay. Over to you.
Yes, good evening, Your Worship, councillors and staff. Thank you for having us out tonight and allowing us to give you an update on the Kingsley Manor redevelopment. If it's okay with you, Your Worship, I'm just going to have this slideshow going in the background, if that's okay. Yeah, so that'll just be going on. This will be pictures of our proposed development. So my name's Duane Round. I'm the building chair for Kingsley Housing Society. I've been involved in affordable housing for 15 years and was the building chair for Huswick Place. That was a successful project a couple of years ago. Felicia with me, because I'm a gentleman, I won't say how many years she's been in operating affordable housing. Let's just say it's a lot of years that Felicia has been involved in building and operating affordable housing. So we are a not-for-profit. We've been in operation since 1965, and we have a very strong team in place to make sure that this project is done correctly. It'll be a 28-unit, one-bedroom units for seniors and adults with disabilities in a 3-story apartment building. So we'll be keeping seniors in their homes, close to family, friends, and support services. This is not only good for the seniors, but has an added social, financial, and health benefits to the community. We did our first presentation in March of 2014 and applied for a rezoning and OCP amendment in September of 2014. At that time, we did off-site servicing report. We did an open house, public meetings. We went to the advisory design panel. We just had our proposal was distributed to staff for comment, presented to council, and eventually approved by council. So I'd like to thank council for their support and all the Parksville staff for their help, and especially Director of Planning Blaine Russell and Planner Sarah Ross for getting us to this point. With the comprehensive development that we got, we hired a development consultant, did a land appraisal, capital budget, off-site servicing budget, did a pro forma, a market rent appraisal, a need and demand analyst, a quantity survey, schematic design review, and then we interviewed 5 contractors as a design build contract. At the end of that, we chose Windley Construction to do a design build for our project. Then we did a submission to BC Housing. Thanks to the support and hard work of MLA Michelle Stilwell, we received conditional funding approval from BC Housing and proposal design funding. So since we got that, we've done a hazmat report, geotechnical report, a landscape plan, a transportation plan, sustainable community builders checklist, a cash flow projection, engineering report, and architectural report. So as you can see, we've been very busy getting a lot of the pieces in place for this project. On July 28th, we applied for a development permit with the City of Parksville, which is our next step in a long process. Little has changed from the rezoning and plan that we'd already received, and it follows the comprehensive development in all regards. We do not need any variances for this proposal. At the open house we held at the rezoning, we heard from neighbors of some concerns, so we tried to address them as best as possible. We flipped the plans so the driveway and the garbage are on the other side, next to adjacent parking, which is one of the requests they made. We decided not to add a butterfly roof so as to keep the height down and let as much sunlight into the adjacent buildings as possible. We'll install lights that will shine down and will dim so as not to shine in people's yards next to us. And we are planting several dogwood trees to replace the one we have to remove. We have signed an affordable housing agreement with the City of Parksville, which means this will maintain affordable housing there for many years to come. This is a $5 million asset for the City of Parksville for next 60 years or more, at very little cost to the city or Parksville taxpayers. I know Blaine and Sarah are working very hard to get the development permit done in a timely manner, and we appreciate that very much. I would just like to ask Felicia to say a few words.
Hi, I guess a lot of you know who I am. I'm Felicia from Kingsley, but I'm also Felicia from Island Radio. We remain committed to this development and management and administration of subsidized housing for the most vulnerable citizens in our society. And those with low incomes, we provide them with affordable housing. The mission of our organization is to be a provider, advocate, and resource for persons living in substandard accommodations to provide a safe, secure, and affordable housing option. The participation of all levels of government is absolutely crucial to the success of this project. The Kingsley Low Housing Rental Housing Society believes that the provision of these 28 affordable housing units will strengthen and support the housing available within the housing continuum for the City of Parksville. It will create opportunities for independent seniors and persons with disabilities to have a safe, dependable, and affordable housing close to all the amenities and support services that they require. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Felicia. So in summary, this project will demonstrate that established and strong partnerships prevail, and that all stakeholders continue to be committed, creative, and supportive towards the goal of providing safe, affordable rental housing for those in need in the City of Parksville. Working together in partnership, we can make a difference. We continue to need your help. We are asking for Council to support this project and make it one of Council's priorities, to approve the development permit in a timely manner. We need your help. Thank you. I will try to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Okay, questions from Council. We got lots of questions. Councillor Salter, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Powell, and Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your presentation. I just have a couple questions. This sounds similar to Hustwick House. Is it quite similar to what you did at Hustwick then?
Through your worship, to Councillor Salter, yes, it's very similar to Hustwick Place, except it will not have commercial on the bottom floor, and it will not be a strata unit. Hustwick Place is a strata unit with a lot of most of the units actually being owned by BC Housing and operated by our society, where this building, the units will actually be owned by us.
And just one follow-up.
Sure, go ahead.
So, will you be having assisted living in there, or just it will be they have to be absolutely independent?
Your worship, this would be independent living with support services, so similar to the facilities that we already operate. There's a lot of outside support services that are brought in through VHA and other organizations that are in our community.
Okay. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Duane and Felicia, for coming before Council and giving us an update. It's greatly appreciated. So I have a couple questions that probably have been answered in the past, but just for a refresher, and since the news and that is here as well. So currently, how many residences are there in the Kingsley Manor now?
There are no tenants left in Kingsley Manor at this time.
That's what I thought. So were they placed in other facilities in our community?
Yeah, some were placed in our 49ers, some were placed in the Lions Pioneer Village, some found other accommodations. Most of the longer-term ones had been long gone, so these were all short-term tenants that we tried to give short-term tenancy to.
Okay. Just another follow-up. Construction time. How long do you anticipate? You've set a contract with Willie Construction, so time frame for construction period.
Well, that'll depend a lot on the development permit. As soon as we get the development permit and we find out there's no items on there, which we don't feel that there should be any surprises, it's very similar to the project we brought forward at the rezoning. So once we know that, then we can concurrently perhaps start the building permit process and the demolition permit process. We have a deadline of October 1st from BC Housing, but I'm sure we can get that extended to have all the details in for them. They need to also, once we have the DP, we can do the full drawings, which will take time to do. Those are all the mechanical and all those type of drawings that go with the plans. It'll have to be reviewed by BC Housing and sent to their executive for final approval. We would like to get started in late October. We'd like to have the building up and at least locked in before the winter comes. I hear they're predicting a snowy winter this year, so yeah, it'll be great for the skiers. So we'd like to have it locked up. Our construction costs go way up if you have to build in the winter when you're dealing with cold and rain and trying to keep everything dry. So that's our hope.
One further follow-up. Thank you. Do you already have perhaps a wait list already for residences or residents for Kingsley Manor?
Yes, we have quite a waiting list. It's always evolving, of course, and we are looking at more applications. We are going to have our rents are going to be staggered at $500, $700, and $800. So we're trying to do as much as possible that we can. At the end of the day, we have to operate the building with the rental income that we get and pay all our expenses. We won't get any operating funds from BC Housing. That's not the way they operate anymore. Sorry, what was the question again? Sorry.
Okay. Councillor Powell and then Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks a lot for your presentation. So one of the things I would like to say is whenever you and your organization have come to the city, we have always made a point or an effort to make sure that the things go through because you do such good work in our community and you provide such a great service. And I can't see anything different with this one. And how many were in that, the old Kingsley Manor? How many suites or how many people were in there?
Your Worship, it was six units in there.
Yeah.
It was built in '65. They were getting pretty run down. They were getting to the point they weren't worth to put a lot of money in. And yes, I agree with Councillor Powell. The city has always been very supportive when we've come forward with these projects to help us get it going and to hopefully get it concluded. And those are the kind of partnerships that make these things work.
Yeah, I agree. And so this is going to be 28 suites?
Yes, this will be 28 one-bedroom units.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
And they'll be not fully accessible for handicap, but they will be adaptable to handicap, and a lot of the features will be pre-built into them anyways. Councillor Beale.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. The questions I had have actually been answered. Thank you, Councillor Patterson and Councillor Powell. But I do want to thank you for the presentation and for the PowerPoint. It was really great.
Thank you.
Councillor Oates? No? Okay. No, thank you. Very thorough, telling us what's going on. It looks like a really nice building, and it's much needed in the community. There's no doubt about that.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and thank you personally for your support over the last couple of years moving this project along.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Oh, one more question from Councillor Powell.
I just want to acknowledge and thank you for the work you did with the neighbors. I know when you first came to council, that was a big issue, the garbage, the oversight, and so I want to thank you for working with them and changing the design. I think that's really important.
Well, actually, if I may, Your Worship, some of the things they brought forward made a lot of sense. And it also helped us in the transitioning because, as you know, the elevation of this property to the west of us is quite higher than ours, so having the driveway on the side gives us a lot easier transition down to our parking lot.
Thanks again. We look forward to seeing you again. Delete. Push delete. Okay, members of council, moving on. We have our first report tonight. It's the consideration of a development permit for 1080 Industrial Way. I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendations. Moved by Councillor Oates, seconded by Councillor Powell. Mr. Russell, would you please give us the background on the issue regarding the development permit for 1080 Industrial Way?
If from Your Worship, the development permit is intended to facilitate the retention of a shop enclosure and small office addition to a mechanical shop building on the property, a sandblasting tent shed, a pole shed, and a portable storage unit building, and to facilitate a propane tank and associated fence compound on the Industrial 1 zoned property. There was a previous development permit issued in 2004. This application, if approved, will amend the previous development permit to facilitate the aforementioned items. The recommendation is as per the report.
Any questions for Mr. Russell from members of council? Pretty straightforward. Seeing none, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. The next report we have is the 2017 permissive taxation exemptions. I need a mover and a seconder for the 4 recommendations. Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Powell. Mrs. Weeks, would you please give us the background on the issue regarding 2017 permissive taxation exemption applications?
Yeah. In accordance with the Charter, the Council has discretion when considering applications for property tax exemptions. The City has a policy which provides guidance to Council on the consideration and approval of those exemptions. So the policy, which was originally adopted in 2004, was revised in 2013 to encourage a phased approach to reduce the amounts of permissive tax exemptions over a 10-year period. So in order to achieve the reduction in the permissive tax rate from 2.5 in 2013 to 1.67 by 2024, a gradual reduction in the percentage would be needed each year. So in accordance with the policy, the permissive tax exemption granted to each applicant would need to be reduced by about 10.7%, or 29,000, in order to comply with the policy objectives. So this would equal approximately 2% of the tax revenues for 2017. And the recommendation is as per the agenda.
Okay, any questions for Mrs. Weeks from members of council? This is a policy that was adopted by council a few years ago. Councillor Salter, you have a question?
Actually, I would like to speak to it.
Sure, go ahead.
So I've read through this, and actually I would like to make a motion with regard to the ICF tax exemption. And the reason being is that I don't think that, unless someone can tell me otherwise, that they're actually meeting the requirements that they were when they were given the 10-year 100% exemption. Because I don't know what they're doing for the community any longer, for people in the community. Hang on. So yeah, so when that exemption occurred in 2011, that bylaw, it was that the bylaw would not apply to property in the event the use or ownership no longer conformed to the conditions necessary to qualify for the exemption. And there is no train anymore. There hasn't been for 5 years. So the community are not utilizing the tracks or the ICF.
But there are utility. It's a utility corridor, and there's a potential. At some point in time, there'll be there'll be some sort of an E&N trail on that line.
There isn't at this time. We could look at that at the time that there was an E&N trail. This time there isn't. And as far as there being a utility corridor, we have utilities not just there. And people are not getting 100%. There's no 100% permissive tax exemption for other areas where utilities and lines and so on are being held. So I would like to make a motion that we retract the 10-year exemption for the ICF.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Patterson. Discussion. Councillor Oates.
That would require a bylaw change, I believe.
Yep.
I think that would be something a little bit more than just a simple motion.
That's correct.
So, is that what the motion is to change the bylaw?
Yes.
Is that what
yes,
you'd like to do?
Yeah.
I'm gonna speak against it. I'm kind of reluctant because the Island Corridor Foundation as an entity is not going away, and I wouldn't want to get caught with retroactive bills for not paying the city of Langford's in a bit of a conundrum right now. Anyway, Councillor, oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Comas, you had
Your Worship, we don't have the bylaw in front of us, so I'm not sure what the arrangement is with the ICF Corridor Foundation. So if Council would like to pursue this further, may I suggest that the motion be amended to delete the Island Corridor Foundation portion of the recommendation, and that arising out of that Council directs staff to bring back a report on the impact of doing that for the Island Corridor Foundation.
that suit you, Councillor Salter?
Yep, that suits me because the bylaw that I was speaking to was 1474.
Okay.
The old one. The original, yeah, when the original 10-year exemption occurred at Council, yeah.
And for my sake, I'd like to know what the future financial implications might be if we were to do anything of that regard. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. We have a seconder. That motion suits you, Councillor Patterson. You're the seconder. Councillor Oates.
As part of staff's work on this, can we also get an understanding of what other communities are doing? Is there a way we can find out if other communities are granting this permissive tax exemption to the ICF and to what degree they're doing that? Because I understand that we're not getting a lot of utility from ICF, but I also understand that it is a corridor there that we do have a future continued interest in. So.
To the best of my knowledge, and staff can confirm it, to the best of my knowledge, the only municipality that's not permitting, giving them permissive taxation is Langford. And that has caused all kinds of financial troubles for Langford in looking at crossings and things like that. So it's convoluted. Okay. Any other questions? Comments? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. So what does that do to the recommendation?
Okay, Your Worship, so now we need to vote. Basically what that does is
it eliminates
the Island Corridor Foundation from recommendation number 2, and then Council needs to vote on the motion as amended, and then arising from that, another motion to direct staff to investigate the impact on the city of...
So now we're voting on the amendment and on the motion as amended. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. And now we're voting. Okay, Councillor Salter, you're moving it. You're seconded. Councillor Oates. Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. That is carried. Thank you. Okay, now we have a report again from Mrs. Weeks regarding the advanced voting bylaw. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Beale. So would you please give us the background on the advanced voting bylaw, Mrs. Weeks?
So the Local Government Act requires one mandatory advanced voting opportunity to be held on the 10th day before the general voting, which is Wednesday, October 12th, and one additional advanced voting opportunity on another date established by bylaw. So appearing elsewhere on the agenda is the Advance Voting Opportunity Bylaw, which establishes an additional advance voting opportunity to be held on October 19th. And the recommendations as per the agenda.
Any questions for Mrs. Weeks? Oh, okay. Okay, so if there's no questions, I'm going to call the vote. It's fairly straightforward. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. And so, oh, I see. Okay, the next is bylaws. The Parksville Advanced Voting Opportunities Bylaw 2016, number 1530. I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Any comments? No? All those in favor? Thank you. That is carried. All right, we're moving into new business. I'm going to go around the table. Councillor Oates, any new business? Councillor Beale? Councillor Powell? Councillor Salter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I did go down to Wrens Road and spoke to some folks down there regarding the blasting and so on that was happening. Mostly what they are concerned about is their houses shaking. Some people think that their foundations have split as a result of that. However, they also state that that'll be an issue with the contractor. Some of them also say that their windows that have the argon, the ones with the gas in between, have cracked, and so the gas has come out. And again, that'll be an insurance claim against the contractor. They also said, though, that our manager, Mr. Figuera, has made some significant changes with regard to the level of the blasting, and so it's lightened up from what it was when they were first connecting with us. But they do have a question, which is how long do they believe that this blasting will continue, and how long with the dust? Like, do we have any idea what the time frame is on that?
Anybody got an idea? Mrs. Comas?
Yes, Your Worship. I know that it Mr. Russell was just saying he had heard that it would be about 3 weeks. That's about the closest I can come, but I know that it will not be a short period of time.
So 3 more weeks from now,
At
so
least.
Probably early September?
Yeah, it'll be at least. I wouldn't want you to hold me to the 3 weeks, but that would be, say, a minimum amount of time that it will take place.
Okay, well, that's more than what they knew, so that's good. Thank you for that. And then one other thing, I just wanted to bring up that the tiles, we painted the tiles down at the beach this past weekend, and it really was a hoot. I took my daughter and 2 grandchildren, and actually the 5-year-old did a really good job. But there were a lot of people there, and I saw many of them completed, and it just looks wonderful. So I just think it was such a fantastic idea. I really, really like it.
Yeah, I think Mrs. Comas, not Mrs. Comas, Mrs. Tardif and Shelley Karukachuk were there, and they were there all weekend. They did a great job.
They were there on Sunday. I mean, they worked really hard, and they really did a good job. Yeah, they really did.
I'm not too proud of my work of art, but at least I...
Me neither.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to echo a little bit of Councillor Salter. I and some of my team from work were the very last painters. We were so honored to be able to put the last few tiles and everything kind of in place, and to be able to have some very specific guidelines on what needed to be completed, and that to fit in with the mural. And it is absolutely amazing, and the people that came about were just enthralled, and the amount of visitors to our community that saw the mural and saw what was going on was truly heartfelt. And I just also wanted to echo so much
thanks for city staff that contributed, and Debbie and Shelley that were there. Not the greatest weather last weekend, but again, just a huge thanks to this community and to staff. It will be forever memorable.
Thank you, and I gather I was out of town on the weekend, but I guess the fireworks was pretty awesome. Was that Kids Fest? Yeah, great. Okay, I just had one small thing to report. I attended the Pagosa. We declared Pagosa Day the last week in July, I believe. Mrs. Weeks, is that correct? July 28th, Pagosa Day. I went down to the park, and Pagosa has 1,300 members. They've been around for the last 23 years. They're going strong, and the oldest member is 100, I guess, and there's a lot of members in their 90s. A very, very active group. So it was lots of fun to go down there and salute them on behalf of the city. Other than that, I'm going to call for a motion to adjourn. Do I have a mover to adjourn? Councillor Beal, Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Beal. All those in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.